Hi, this is Mike Vizard, and I'm here to talk with Matt White, who is a data center interoperability architect with Hewlett-Packard. Matt, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
OpenFlow, what is it about, and why should people care about it, since not a lot of people seem to understand the core technology?
Right. Well, it's definitely more of a vision, in my opinion, at this point in time, and it is the direction that networking in particular is headed. As more and more environments are becoming converged, meaning we're seeing SAN, network, and compute traffic follow the same paths, go over the same infrastructures, we're also seeing virtualization of those technologies. Now, we've been virtualizing compute for 10, 15 years now. And I think the latest figures I've seen have really been around 90% of all server infrastructure now is virtualized, which is amazing when you look at where we were 10 or 15 years ago, where every application had a dedicated piece of hardware associated with it. So clearly organizations have realized the benefit of that level of virtualization. What has not kept pace is really the networking aspect, or virtualizing the network in the data center space. We're still deploying individually managed access layer switches in a campus or enterprise environment. And every single one of those switches needs someone to touch it in one way or another. And then if a new application is added to the data center, if there's a policy change, whether that's security or performance, we have to go and touch every single one of those devices again. And that model has been moving away from other technologies. You look at some of the things that are being done with wireless. We have 2 controllers. You always want 2 for redundancy, handling a bunch of different access points. And you never touch the access points. All your configuration and policy management is done centrally at the control plane. When we port that to the network world, so routing and switching, you really see that centralized controller model being able to manage and handle all of these almost thin clients that act as hardware switches. So instead of having someone touch every single new access layer switch for a new building and a hospital that comes online, you could simply have discovery protocols enable a hardware device to be able to talk back to centralized controllers where all of that policy, security, quality of service, all of those mechanisms are defined in one place centrally and then pushed out to those appliances that used to be access layer switches that had to be individually configured and managed. Benefits to that should be fairly obvious. The fact that there's one place to do things. If you need to change something, if you need to update something, and certainly if you need to manage something, you're doing it at one point as opposed to potentially thousands.
There's a lot of conversation about SDN out there, and there's a lot of folks who are talking about their platform versus another. Why does it matter that one is open versus just simply interoperable? Since a lot of vendors will say we're interoperable, the open question is not such a big deal.
Yeah.
What's the issue?
Absolutely. So you look at it in terms of anything else in the industry right now. When you're deploying a network, would you rather use an open standard, OSPF for instance, or BGP, so that when companies merge, well, now I have 2 devices that can talk to each other natively instead of using proprietary technologies. The significant advantage of OpenFlow, especially in an SDN architecture, is the fact that the customer has the ability and the choice to choose from a number of different vendors. That competition is always going to drive some level of innovation. Compare it to mainframes. When someone purchased a mainframe, it was monolithic, it was extremely costly, very significant levels of service had to go into the ongoing maintenance of that model. As we move into open standards, as we deploy different versions of Linux, there's no real limit in terms of what kind of hardware can be developed for that platform. Not only does that increase market focus, but it also drives down costs for consumers. And we put open standards into every conceivable product that we touch. We advise the customer to consider that before deploying any solution, whether it's SDN or route switch, wireless, you name it.
So SDNs really are about a software-defined layer above that network. Does that mean the entire network's going to get a lot more automated? Or these APIs that are being exposed turning the network into something that's programmable?
Well, that's exactly it, and that's one of the benefits of SDN. There are application plugins for specifically HP's model of SDN, where if you're running Microsoft Exchange and you want the network to adapt to traffic patterns that Exchange may like to see. Traditionally, you would need to configure quality of service on every port. You need to define access lists from a security perspective. And then if you added servers, if you added applications, or completely changed applications, you would need to revisit all of those devices, and it'd be a lot of work. With the SDN model, you're doing it in one place. You're doing it at centralized controllers. You're really decoupling that control plane from the data plane, which is how the network exists right now. So we move forward, the management of the entire network arguably could happen from 2 devices as opposed to 10,000.
Do you think network administrators are ready to give up their command line interfaces?
Probably not. I think that is a concern. There's an aspect to this model and to that deployment that doesn't really sit well with a lot of folks, especially folks invested in the technologies. My mindset is at this point in time, you really shouldn't need a 10-year veteran with multiple CCIEs to go and deploy 100 access layer switches. It should be able to be handled in an automated fashion by someone who is potentially deploying the application. So there's a learning curve associated with this. Those sort of things aren't bad. Those types of learning curves drive the industry. They increase adoption of technologies that might be better. I know at one point in time, we didn't have IP. And then the internet came along and everyone realized that was the way to go. People learned how to subnet. There's no doubt in my mind that there are very smart people out there handling networks that are going to be able to adapt and manage an SDN architecture every bit as well as they have been a traditional network.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.